For the delay, a few technical issues, but hopefully you can now see me. I'm just going to double check, make sure, if you can see me, maybe just stick into the chat that you can see me. Because there's all manner of things going wrong. Okay, that seems to be working. So apologies again. Right, what I'm going to do is get everything up and ready. These things are wonderful when they work out and they're nice and smooth. Today is not one of those days. Let's get going. Let me share my screen. Great. Okay, so you should now see the AI generation gap, building a digital strategy that converts every guest. Apologies again. You will, if you've signed up to register to this, you'll be able to get the recording. And importantly, every single slide has a QR code where you'll be able to download the whole slides, but also you'll be able to get the cheat sheet, which is kind of a condensed version of today's session. So again, let's get started, shall we? So what am I covering today? I'm going to cover 5 key things. The first is the AI search shift. We're going to be talking about what has happened in the last 18 months, but crucially, I'm going to be talking about what has happened in the last 90 days that have made such an impact in how hotels are being found and ultimately booked. I'm going to talk about the AI generation gap. I think there's so much noise about AI and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. The reality is that baby boomers are reacting to AI in very different ways to Gen Z, for example. And I'm going to explore all the different stats that suggest how each generation is adopting or adapting their discovery journey. I'm going to walk you through the changing role of the hotel website, what actually is changing, and what you need to do to adapt your digital marketing strategy. And then for the first time, I'm going to be presenting a new framework for creating a finely balanced digital strategy that will hopefully be easy to understand and give you a sense of what is needed to drive extra visibility in these very changing times. And then if you've never done anything before in terms of driving visibility through AI, I'm going to give you 4 points to my 90-day digital roadmap to help maximize your visibility through these channels. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about the AI search shift. If you've ever seen me speak before, you've probably heard me say this, and I think it can't be understated. Search behavior has changed more in the last 18 months than in the previous 18 years. So let's just talk about how AI is rapidly changing discovery, research, comparison, and booking behavior. I think that's really important to note, that the whole journey is being completely disrupted from what it sort of used to be for the last sort of 20 years or so. Let's talk about how ChatGPT has grown at a historic rate. So ChatGPT, it achieved 100 million weekly active users in its first 2 months. It's now somewhere between 800 and 900 million weekly active users. And when we compare that to the speed of growth that the internet saw, that Google saw, that ChatGPT is now achieving, you can see how their acceleration is being dwarfed by the length of time it took for the internet and Google. 3.3 years ChatGPT, Google more like 12.5 years, and the internet around 10 to hit that number. So where does that leave us? Well, travelers now expect AI assistance, and a couple of stats from booking.com recently. 80% of travelers now want AI assistant during the booking journey at some point throughout the booking journey. That's what the booking.com found. The travel predictions report that they released earlier this year. And demand for AI-assisted travel planning has increased 4-fold since 2024, which kind of makes sense because, let's face it, we're all using it. If we can reduce the length of time that we're putting into that research phase, I think that's only a positive. So let's talk about how Google has fundamentally changed too. Well, obviously, AI overviews are omnipresent now. They now feature in one in every 2 searches. 50% of all searches now feature these AI overviews. And importantly and crucially for your business, 60% of searches now end without a click. That's going to change even more dramatically, which I'll talk about in a second, from the most recent Google update. But importantly, the key distinction needs to be made. If you own a website, your level of organic traffic, unless you're actively working to improve it, is likely reducing. So sort of, if you stand still, you will be seeing a reduction in traffic. And that's generally across the board. If you're managing to spike that or buck that trend, then you're doing very well indeed. So key takeaway, some of the biggest shifts in travel search have actually happened only in the last few months. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the most important things I think you need to know about from the last 90 days or so. So OpenAI changed direction. It's worth noting this. So OpenAI obviously owns ChatGPT. It decided that being the world's biggest recommendation engine is a bigger opportunity than becoming the booking engine itself. So it ran an experiment called instant checkout in the US, where ultimately it was taking the transaction. It was owning the transaction. But it realized that, owning the transaction comes with a lot of headaches. People want refunds. People want, who do they speak to when something goes wrong? Inevitably, that always happens. So instant checkout was the experiment. And they've decided with this whole approach of travel brand handoffs, which is why when you enable the booking.com app within ChatGPT, you now see it says view on booking.com. For a long time, we all anticipated, those of us that are sort of following the search industry quite rigorously, that in-app transactions were the future. ChatGPT has done a bit of a U-turn on that. And when we consider that this, the impact for hotels, I would say this is actually quite positive. There are direct booking apps that exist like the Hotels Network, but I would suggest that these are relatively unproven, and I don't really believe their effectiveness, because why would you go to a direct booking app when booking.com is better known and has probably far greater inventory and sometimes even better rates? So I think that's a challenge. Nonetheless, OpenAI's approach in this regard is a positive for the hotel industry. A very recent one, this only happened about 3 weeks ago, TikTok Go launched in the USA. So what is it? TikTok is effectively becoming a booking channel, not just a discovery channel. And this is something we'll cover when we go into depth about the Gen Zs. So what they're doing is closing the gap between discovery and booking, but only through OTA. So effectively what they've said is that these creators, like you can see on the screen, can now partner with OTAs and take a share of the commission. So they can promote hotels, whether they be influencers or just general creators, and can be promoting them. And then the link, and then the customer can see the hotel and go directly straight through to the booking, the hotel via an OTA. So this is interesting because creator content is becoming a distribution strategy. But when we look at the impact for hotels, I actually think this is quite negative, not least because obviously it's sending traffic to an OTA rather than direct, which is not part of the deal. But what we anticipate, obviously this is brand new, 3 weeks old and only in the US, but what we anticipate is that there will be fewer branded searches. So what tends to happen, or tended to happen, was that people would discover you on TikTok and then they would Google your name and then end up on your website. So we're expecting fewer branded searches, which inevitably could lead to less direct web traffic and indeed fewer direct bookings. Not an immediate issue, given that it's brand new and it's only in the US, but an interesting insight into how things and where things are going. ChatGPT ads have arrived in the USA. They've been around probably slightly longer than 90 days, but suffice to say, it's really important to mention that their ad revenue, as predicted by Reuters, is 2.5 billion this year alone, given that they're only in the US and it's still kind of pretty experimental. But most importantly, Reuters anticipate that their ad revenue will go up to 100 billion within 3 years. So you can see that this is a big play that they're trying to do to actually start getting some decent money in because obviously they're losing millions, if not billions, every single year just developing the technology. So where does this leave us for hotels? I actually think this is positive, because if you consider that $100 billion worth of ad revenue is going to be leaving the platforms like Meta, Facebook, Instagram, etc., and Google, that in theory could bring cost per clicks lower. And of course, ChatGPT could be a real asset to driving revenue. And I think it's going to be important because of the big change that Google suggested. They had their big conference about 3 weeks ago now as well. And the CEO of Google described it as the biggest change to the Google search bar in 25 years. So let's have a look at this. Google is transforming search from keywords to conversation. So we've known about this. If you're in the UK, you might have seen some of the ad campaigns that use the strapline, search like never before. They've been encouraging us now for about 18 months to really engage with Google in far sort of more conversational prompts and searches. So this is really just sort of embedding that technology deeper within the search bar. So the search bar actually grows in size as you type, but it's a bit more nuanced than that. Importantly, Google is moving from links to answers. So instead of page one featuring a whole load of ads, a hotel pack, and 10 organic links, obviously a few other bits and pieces in there as well, but it will effectively create a custom layout for each individual prompt or search. So if you consider that page one of Google used to be the holy grail of marketing, if you got on page one for a highly searched keyword, that basically gave you enough traffic to drive enough bookings directly. Wonderful. And that's really where my business has helped for so many years. Unfortunately, now Google will start to complete tasks such as planning trips and even making bookings. So that page one will cease to exist in a matter of weeks. And I think this is the biggest shift in marketing, arguably ever, since the dawn of the internet. I don't want to be too hyperbolic with this, but I think this is the biggest change we're going to see probably in our recent lifetime. So what does this mean? Well, I think the impact for hotels is kind of a mixture of positive and negative. There are going to be fewer opportunities to win traffic through traditional SEO alone, but increasingly visibility of your hotel will depend on AI confidence, not just ranking. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've got to be visible to AI platforms, and Google, in the most traditional search sense, is going to be a native AI platform. So all the things that we know that drive great visibility on the likes of ChatGPT will now be completely aligned with how you become visible on Google. So quite a lot to take in there. There's some big changes happening. Let's have a look at how the different generations differ in terms of how they discover and book. So the key point here is that the market is splitting into different search behaviors. So however people discover, research, validate, and then ultimately book their hotels is quite different. So to explain this, I've naturally used ChatGPT to create me 4 avatars. And for the Gen Z traveler, she's aged between 18 and 28. This is Sophie. Now, Sophie, if she could lean into your strategy or marketing meeting in your hotels, she would knock on the door and say, if you want to target me, I want inspiration before I want information. So Sophie discovers through hotels, unsurprisingly, through the likes of TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, creators, ChatGPT. These are the types of searches that she's making. And there's a few stats here that really sort of summarize how she's approaching it. Again, use that QR code if you want all of these stats. It can be used as a reference document, and there's a cheat sheet at the end as well. So 64% of Gen Zs use TikTok as a search engine. 40% prefer TikTok or Instagram over Google for discovery. 74% use social media for travel inspiration, and 57% say short form video influences travel decisions. 53% trust influencers more than traditional advertising. So how does Sophie book? Let's break this right down. Well, she discovers visually, she trusts creator brands, she validates through reviews, and she books quickly on mobile. Importantly, 76% of Gen Zs book travel entirely on mobile, and 62% say authenticity matters more than luxury branding. Finally, 59% actively seek hidden gems over mainstream hotels. So where does this leave us with Sophie? Well, Sophie, her booking journey is fast, social-led, and emotion-driven. So that's Gen Zs. Let's look at James. He's our millennial. And if he was in your marketing meeting, he would be saying, I want inspiration before I want information. James still uses Google heavily, but increasingly layers AI into his research journey using Google, ChatGPT, reviews, YouTube, and indeed OTAs. These are the types of searches that James is making. And if we break down his stats, 60% of millennials now use AI tools during travel planning. 71% compare hotels across multiple websites before booking. 68% say reviews heavily influence booking decisions, and 65% prefer booking direct when clear value is offered. So what do these stats tell us? Well, if we look at James's booking journey, he compares multiple tabs. He researches extensively, he validates through reviews, and he looks for direct booking value. A couple of last ones, 86% of millennials are comfortable booking trips entirely online, 73% research on mobile before converting elsewhere, and 58% say flexible cancellation impacts booking choice. So where does that leave us? Well, my key takeaway for millennials is that AI assists the decision, but rarely makes it alone. They research, compare, make informed and logical decisions. So that leads us to our Gen X. This is Sarah, and if she was in your marketing meeting, she would be saying, I already know roughly what I want. Sarah still relies heavily on Google, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, and brand websites. These are the types of searches that she's making. And about half of all Gen X travelers still rely primarily on traditional search engines. About half still regularly use OTAs during trip planning. About 2/3 say reviews are essential before booking. And 61% prefer desktop browsing for major travel purchases. So what does the data tell us about Sarah? Sarah compares carefully. She values clarity and reassurance. She still visits multiple websites and often books direct if trust is high. A few more stats there. And what can we take away from Sarah? Well, her booking journey is structured. It's comparison-led and less AI influenced. Finally, David. David's our baby boomer. And if he was in your marketing meeting, he would be saying, just make this easy for me. He still prefers Google, direct websites, OTAs, and recommendations. Those are the types of searches that he makes. And interestingly, 29% of boomers say they would use AI for travel recommendations. So clearly not as many as some of the other generations. Just over 2/3 still begin travel planning with a Google search. I wonder how much that will change with these new Google changes coming in a matter of weeks. 63% prefer booking through familiar brands or websites, and 58% say customer service influences booking decisions more than price. So, David, what does he do? He researches slowly. He trusts established brands. He often books on desktop, and he may still call the hotel directly. A few more stats there. Again, feel free to use that QR code. The booking journey is traditional for David. He is reassurance-led and very human-first. So where does that leave us? Well, I think it's safe to assume, and obviously you can see every stat I've used is coming from a credible source. For me, I think the key point is this: search is fragmented into multiple entry and influence points. If we look at Gen Z, they're very social first discovery. Millennials have this hybrid approach of AI assisted journeys. Gen X are sort of Google and OTA comparison, and boomers is sort of how we would market to everyone 2 years ago, arguably. So my key takeaway is simply that AI search is growing rapidly, but traditional search still drives enormous revenue, at least for now. So where does that leave us? Well, the changing role of the hotel website, I think why AI has changed everything we used to know about awareness. And I think if you've seen me speak before, you've probably seen these slides. I think it's a really important point that we have to make to understand just the level of disruption that AI is creating. And to explain this, let's break digital marketing down into two simple roles, at least before AI. The first of which was simply to build digital assets that inform, entice, and convert. So what is that? Well, designing websites, curating social media feeds, and optimizing our aggregator listings. Very simple. The second part of that digital marketing remit was simply to drive visibility and traffic to those assets. So how do we do that? One, through organic. We do SEO to hopefully get on that page one of Google, or we grow our social following. And of course, we can run a variety of ads, and that would lead us to a sort of a joint strategy where we're investing in one, we're paying for the other, and over time, we're moving our visibility and traffic up that delivers the return on investment. Where we are now is this. When anybody makes a branded search, so some sort of search, regardless of which platform, something that includes your brand name, or indeed a non-branded search, something that describes your hotel, increasingly they are seeing this bit in the middle. I call this your AI shadow. It is effectively AI's interpretation of your brand. And importantly, it is something that you do not own. We've worked really, really hard on creating digital assets that we own, like our website, like our social media feeds, etc. We have almost complete control of those, but your AI shadow, we do not. And this arguably, I think, is your most important digital asset because it is the interpretation of your brand. It's AI's version of it. And it's a good way to think about it is your unique selling points, your online reputation, and as if like an impartial critique, like a journalist came and stayed and created a sort of a formal review about your experience. And these AI shadows can take many different forms, but they generally take one of these two. The first is a 1 to 2 sentence recommendation. So when we look at traditional search on Google, when we search for example, the Grand in York, we see something like this, which is your meta description, which is here, your page title, and of course the URL. Importantly, that meta description, that 2 or 3 sentences, normally about 150 characters, that is clearly considered. If you read it, stay at the Grand York, the only 5-star hotel in York, perfect for romantic getaways and spa breaks. Explore our latest hotel deals in York today. That's considered. Somebody in the marketing team has given that a great deal of thought. With AI, nobody signs this off, and it's different every single time. So it's very different to your, it's sort of similar to a meta description, but you did not write it. And I think that's a really key distinction. If you read it, it's far more descriptive than it is enticing, should we say. The second most popular form is the pros and cons evaluation. So this is effectively where you say, okay, that hotel sounds good, tell me more. Or what are the pros and cons of staying at this hotel? And so effectively you get these wonderful glowing pros, all the positives of why you would choose that particular property. But also you get the cons, the negative sentiment that it has derived from what it knows about your business online. And importantly, this is quickly becoming the gatekeeper content. It's whether or not people see this and decide to move on, continuing their journey, or they say, no, not for me. So this stuff is being unearthed, whether you like it or not. So why is this so important? Well, this is, I believe, the new first impression for many of the customers, or at least it features in the customer discovery process of your brand. The digital assets that we've built, curated, and optimized are only seen if the customer goes beyond the AI shadow. And how your business is described across the entirety of the web matters more than where you rank or indeed how nice your website looks. So where does that leave us? If we look at what was happening last year, with the vast majority of all search being on a traditional search engine like Google, this is what we get. Traditional search gives us very little information before we actually visit a website. And to sort of illustrate this, we use the marketing funnel model, which assumes that regardless of what you're buying, whether it be a pair of shoes or a car and everything in between, you go through these 5 stages of awareness, interest, consideration, intent, and purchase. With traditional search, there's very little to go on. So inevitably you click, and that's been the way for the last 20 years or so. But increasingly where we are now is AI search is sort of doing more of that process for us. So AI search can move us much further down the funnel before we visit a website, because we can say, oh, tell me more. What are the pros and cons? Does it have a spa, etc.? So we get a lot more information before we even visit a website. So in theory, we're getting higher quality traffic to our website because they've seen more of us. They know more about us. They haven't just seen a 1-sentence summary, and they've still decided to come to our website. But I think, unfortunately, where we're heading towards the end of this year, I had this originally in a previous slide deck that said next year, but I think given the Google announcement, I think it's far more likely to be autumn, winter this year of where we're going, which is AI search basically does most of it, and people are just arriving ready to make a purchase, whether it be to an OTA or indeed through your direct website. So guests will regularly develop the intent to purchase within AI search itself before being handed off to a website to complete their transaction, as ChatGPT has sort of suggested that that's the way it'd like to go. So where does that leave us? Well, I believe the website is no longer your most important digital asset. The more potential customers will see your AI shadow, as I'm naming it, than your website. So we must prioritize accordingly. So a quick recap, there's a lot to go through so far. Let's just summarize this before we move on. The search landscape has changed. I think everybody knows that. This is fragmenting guest behavior by generations, and it's created a new, vitally important digital asset, which I'm calling your AI shadow. So what do we do? You might be asking. Well, to help understand what these changes mean for your digital strategy and how you can get in front of those customers that you want to attract, I've created a framework which I'm calling the carbs, protein, and fats. If anyone's into their macronutrients, this is all very nicely presented acronym. And the whole idea is simply that successful hotels of the next few years will build balanced digital growth systems. So if we break this down, carbs is your fuel. Carbs is going to give you your AI visibility and discovery. Protein is your strength. Protein is going to give you greater conversion and revenue, and fats is going to help you retain and attract more loyal customers. So let's break these down into the acronyms. C initially stands for customer clarity. Clearly defining who your hotel is for, so guests, platforms, and AI can instantly recognize your value. Why is this important? Well, in an AI-driven discovery world, ambiguity is invisible. It is invisibility. So a very simple action. I'm going to give you a rationale and a simple action for each one of these points. Define your hotel in 1 sentence. This hotel is for this type of customer who want this type of experience in or near this location. And of course, you might be thinking, well, we can't possibly just target one, and nor should you, but you do need to be specific about the types of customers and the types of experience that you offer. Like in the example of the piece of content that we developed for Native by Numa recently, talking about families as a target market. So the next point is around authority mentions, getting trusted third parties talking about your website. And why this matters is because AI borrows confidence from credible sources. So the more authoritative the mention, the more your hotel is surfaced in an AI generated recommendation. So very simply, if you've got the budget to be investing in digital PR, pursue press coverage and travel guide features and really start to get your name out there in really credible publications. But if you don't have the budget for digital PR, trade press coverage is probably the easiest win. If you've got something meaningful today, get a press release, get it over to one of the trade publications, and that will again help with your visibility. Reviews are obviously incredibly important, more so arguably than ever before in terms of digital marketing. Why? Because AI reads patterns, not just star ratings. So it's looking for specific language in reviews. So things like quiet room, fast check-in, exceptional breakfast. These things are all feeding your AI discovery. And a very simple thing to do is not ask, how did we do? Not ask, please leave a review. Encourage specificity. What did you enjoy the most about your stay? And importantly, if you've got any recurring issues that are cropping up from your reviews, make sure that you are addressing those within the review itself. So B stands for brand consistency. Making sure that you have total consistency everywhere you are listed, not just the obvious ones of Business Profile and TripAdvisor. So any inconsistency in terms of your name, address, phone number, description, that reduces trust and is going to lead to you not being recommended quite as much. So very simply, audit your name, address, and phone number on every single channel, including some of the more obscure ones like you can see on the screen, and have one positioning statement and one voice and put that everywhere. S stands for strengthening machine readability. So helping AI understand, parse, and recommend your hotel. So making sure that unstructured why is this important? Because unstructured websites are invisible to the algorithms shaping guest discovery. So making sure that you've got structured FAQ sections, schema markup, and clear content hierarchies. That's your H1, H2, H3 header tags. And answer questions guests are already asking before asking AI before they reach you. So if you've got a chatbot on your website, or indeed if you're just capturing it the old-fashioned way at reception, if you know those specific questions, get them on your website, because that will fuel your visibility. So that's all about maximizing visibility. Protein is all about conversion and revenue. So P stands for paid media. Using paid channels like Meta, Bing, Google Hotel Ads, Google Ads, etc. Why is this important? Well, visibility alone does not drive bookings, and I genuinely think organic traffic is going to reduce enormously over the next 6 months. We've generally seen it sort of drop off slowly, but I think with this Google change that we're expecting throughout the summer, it's going to completely change the way customers interact with Google, and ultimately whether or not they click on your website. So I think paid is an essential part of your strategy going into 2027. Concentrate on high intent spend and high intent audiences. So retargeted visitors, people that have visited your website but didn't book, staying present throughout their decision-making process. Branded search, and also destination ready travelers if you're in a sort of a popular destination. Revenue optimization is obviously an incredibly important part. I use this image because we had a client that we were working with that were doing brilliant in terms of their extra visibility, that were doing brilliant in terms of their extra organic traffic. But something we don't control as the agency is the OTA disparity frequency. And we found that they were 61% of the time more expensive on their own website. And I don't fully understand the nuances of revenue management, but what I do know is that if you've got those sorts of disparity frequency percentages, it does impact your direct bookings. So using a tool like the Hotels Network can help you mitigate that. So why is this important? Obviously, your channel mix, your cost of acquisition, and ADR are all determine true commercial performance. And as I've said, simply monitor your OTA disparity frequency to make sure that you are giving one of the best available rates on your website. Offers are incredibly important, all about giving guests a compelling reason to book now and directly on your terms. Direct booking is almost always the least convenient option. It's always worth remembering that. So guests need a very clear and emotionally resonant reason to choose direct over OTA. So simply make the direct offer feel unmissable. Free cancellation, free breakfast, whatever it is that you're talking about, best rate guarantee, make that really prominent throughout the booking journey. Targeting, I won't go into this in too much detail because we've covered it in quite depth already. But obviously Gen Zs, Millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers, as we've discover you and make their decisions in very different ways. So make sure that you understand who the vast majority of your customers are and adapt your strategy accordingly. E stands for experience optimization, which is a posh way of saying make sure your website works properly. So, reducing the point of friction from the booking journey, and guests simply won't tolerate a poor booking experience. So, a very simple action that you have to do here is just audit your mobile user experience from first click all the way to confirmation. And I've included the 3 core web vitals, which have been around for about 5 or 6 years now. But probably the most notable one is largest contentful paint, which is an incredibly jargonous way of saying the longest period of time that the biggest asset on the website actually loads, and that needs to be 2.5 seconds. So an obvious one, forgive me, it's obvious, but I see this happen so much. Compress images before uploading the website. They've got to be compressed. You don't want a 15 megabyte image because that's going to slow down the site, but it's also going to impact bookings. Intent capture is matching content and landing pages to guest intent. So guests, as we've discovered, arrive closer to booking than ever before. So having pages like this that you can see on the screen, where we were driving family-led traffic to this particular piece of content, which is all about making half-term easy for customers of Native. Non-branded demand is obviously paramount to getting people that didn't know you exist to come and find you. And really what we want to be doing is creating destination-led and experience-led content. So to use, again, an example from a current client of ours, if you look at the 3 pieces of content that we produced last month: London with 3 generations without anyone falling out; when London is a month long, not a weekend; where to stay in London when you're working long days. 3 different types of customer. We're speaking directly to those people, highly irrelevant for most, but highly relevant to some. And that's really what we want to be doing, is speaking. You want somebody to read your content and be like, that sounds like me. And that is going to give you a real competitive edge. That leads us finally to the FATS framework, which is all about building lasting guest relationships through owned data and sustained engagement. So first-party data has obviously been a point of discussion for a long time in the industry now. Website traffic, as we've discussed, is reducing fast. So making sure that we have as much information of our guests as possible, emails, but also preferences. So increase email capture at every touch point. Use things like OTA win-back campaigns, and invest in email relevance as much as possible. Audience nurturing is really becoming really important, because guests who discover you today may not convert for several months. So making sure that you've got automated sequence like post-stay follow-up, anniversary triggers, or even re-engagement sequences like you can see on the screen. And I think it's a really important point to say, send stories, not just sales offers. It's so easy to just send a simple offer out or a basic newsletter, but really what is going to get the biggest engagement is when you talk about real human stories, whether that be staff or customers or elsewhere. Be as creative as you can with it, because those are the things that are going to get the nurturing cut through. Penultimately, touch points is our T, the same message amplified across multiple channels. We've been doing this now for about 10 years or so, since I started the agency. But what I've found is it's still as effective today as it ever has been. So a good point to make around this is, look, we are in the attention economy. You might have heard that phrase. And a good way to think about it is they see your message for the first time on the 11th time. You've got to stay present, because most people will ignore you, or indeed ignore your emails. And a very simple action to do this is any email that you're sending, certainly if it's got a sales message, resend it 48 hours later to anyone that did not open it the first time. That always guarantees a bit of an uplift. And use something called Facebook ad amplification. This is simply the process of taking your email database, uploading it into Facebook. It matches with Facebook profiles, and then you can advertise to that select group. You won't get all of them. Normally you get about 50-60%. But if you get that, then you send ads to them during that sales window that say, did you see the offer? Did you see the email? Make sure you book within the next 48 hours or whatever it is that you're saying. again, you're just trying to get that cut through to stop people in their tracks because you're too easy. Everyone is too easy to ignore. Finally, simple sales emails. If you're going to send a sales email, say one thing and one thing only. It's far more likely to get noticed. And a very simple structure is, rather than trying to create long newsletters with 18 different offers, one for spa, one for golf, one for rooms, one for F&B, choose one and send one single thing. That always produces far better results. So where does that leave us? Just coming to the end of our presentation, 90-day digital roadmap. Here's 4 things that I would do. FAQs on almost every single page, making sure that every page within your top navigation has 5 or 6 FAQs with those 2 to 3 sentence summaries that could be easily picked up by AI, and they must be structured. Monitor your AI shadow. So use a tool like ScorePlan, where you can track how you're being recommended across ChatGPT and Gemini. Monitor for negative sentiment and understand the cons of choosing your hotel. Structure your website for AI. So add I never get this right, llms.txt file. Got there. It's a very simple file that just is uploaded to your website and very easy to do, but it really helps LLMs, large language models, understand who you are and what you're about. Add schema markup to content, events, and things like frequently asked questions. And finally, real sort of, again, this has been around for a long time, but the difference is nowadays your technical site health carries more weight than it ever previously did. So missing meta descriptions, descriptive alt text to images, and an XML sitemap. If you don't know what any of those means, you don't necessarily need to, you just know you need to get them fixed, because those things are anchoring your site down from getting the visibility it perhaps deserves. So to round it all off, thank you for listening today. Apologies again, we were slightly late starting. Let's round it off with 5 key takeaways. Number 1, search behavior is changing faster than anyone expected. The market is fragmenting by generation. Marketing strategy must reflect multiple discovery paths. Your website is no longer the most important digital asset. Arguably, your AI shadow is. I gave you my framework for sustainable growth, that balanced digital strategy of carbs for fueling your discovery, protein for driving conversion, and fats for increasing loyalty and retention. And finally, success in this very new era of AI search depends less about gaming the algorithms, but more on creating a brand that the machines can confidently recommend. I hope you found today useful. As I said throughout, the QR code is going to give you a breakdown of all the frameworks, and I've also put it all into a simple cheat sheet so you can use as a reference document. It has all the stats and figures and all the sources, and obviously all the frameworks that we talked about today. Please leave me a comment in the chat. I'm going to come out of here and I'll be responding to those. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I hope you found it useful. If you did find it useful, also message me via email or in the chat. I'd love to hear your comments. So thanks very much for watching, and speak soon.